Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of my live tea tasting. I've got a great blend for you guys today, and this is one that I've done before, but from a different company. My first go around was with Adagio, and continuing on with with the Tealula month, and actually it's probably going to go on a little bit longer than a month, but that's for another day. Today's blend is white peony, also known as Baimudan, which is a white tea, and I'll show you why in just a moment. But this is one of my favorite blends. I love a good white tea. They're smooth, they're so soothing. I just love this. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look at this. Check out the liqueur on that. Perfectly clear. You can barely see any color, and that's very typical for a plain white tea, one that's not flavored, one that's not tampered with. Hey Ma, welcome. Hey Gamer, welcome. So this one is not tampered with at all. It's basically just fresh off the leaf, slightly withered, and packed and shipped. There's very little processing to go with Baimudan, and there's something very interesting that I love showing. If I can, it's kind of like, okay, you know what? I'll set this one aside because it's a good example. But we'll take a look at the tea itself and how it's put together. You can see there can't be any processing because it looks like it's just giant whole leaves. But you will also notice there's already one kind of tangled up in there. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it kind of does, but it doesn't. Okay, well, I'm breaking it. Anyway, okay, here it was. I was able to kind of sort of get rid of it, but take a look at that. It's a big whole leaf, nice and chunky. But if you take a closer look, you guys know about the traditional tea pluck. 2 leaves and a bud comes out looking like this. I'm sure that's a rude gesture somewhere, but that's not meant to be. You can see the 2 leaves, leaf 1 and leaf 2, and then the bud right in there. So basically what this process is done is they pluck the leaf, spread it out on a sheet or a bamboo mat, just on one layer, and let it wither for a couple of hours. It doesn't really need to have a whole lot of processing. Sometimes they do it in the sun, sometimes they do it with lamps, but they make it nice and crispy, as you can see, for like maybe about 16 hours, something like that. And once it's done, they pack it up and they ship it out. So you can see, because there's no oxidation whatsoever, you get a nice clear liqueur. There's very, very little color to it. All you see is what little photosynthesis, not chlorine, what's the chlorophyll that seeps out of the leaf. But because, as well, this is a white tea, we're going to use very, very very, very warm temperature. Brain farting for some reason. Anyway, so you can see, like, this is done at about 180 degrees for 3 minutes. And you don't want to oversteep it because it's very, very light, very easy to mess up. That is really good. See, now what I look for in a white tea is not a strong flavor, but an evident flavor. A lot of white teas, you don't really taste anything. It just tastes like water. But for something like this has got a nice smooth texture to it. It's kind of velvety, but it's got a flavor that's there, and that's what's really important. You don't want to drink Oh yeah, this white tea is incredible. You don't want to drink just hot water and hope to see that there's something in it. White tea can be a little bit deceptive, but you're gonna get like a coppery kind of saltiness to it, and that's what you're really looking for. I'm looking for on the leaf. There's a few of them that I saw. I hope that it comes out, but as you can see, there's a nice whiteness on the leaf. That just goes to show there was very, very little processing, and this is a very quite young bud. So you want to pick it early before it gets too mature, and at that point, the flavor itself becomes kind of sort of strong. So the pluck on this one shows that it was traditionally plucked, rather than the more forgiving heavy pluck. The heavy pluck is more than just the two leaves and a bud, but you also get like some of the other lower leaves, the more mature ones, which is fine. It's okay to have that in there, but this particular pluck doesn't have it, which I find to be very, very good. Now, in comparison, we had the dry leaf. Now, if you look at the wet leaf, you'll notice something. There's really not a huge difference between, there we go, between the wet leaf that's been steeped and the dry leaf. And that's because of the lack of processing. It hasn't been rolled. It hasn't been, well, it keeps falling apart. It hasn't been rolled. It hasn't been broken in any way. So you can see this one kind of sort of has the two leaf and a bud in it. It's hard to tell because it looks like the bud was broken off right there. But you see that it's got that formation to it. So because there's no processing, there's no breaking, there's no oxidation on it, you're getting the full whole leaf. And this is very, very soft. Very, very soft flavor. It's kind of coppery, but it's nice and smooth. And that's what I really love about white teas. The only other white tea that I truly, truly recommend as a pure white tea is the Silver Needle. Silver Needle it's this before it opens. So it's very early in the season. They're plucked while they're still closed. And they're so young, they have a lot of the white fur on it, and that's where the name comes from. That little white down, gives it a kind of a shimmering, silvery tone to it. And so, because it's shaped like a needle, you got Silver Needle. And after they're steeped, generally, they don't even open at all because they don't have enough leaf material to open. Oh, excuse me. So you'll have these gorgeous leaves that are, like, if you can get them open, it's very, very delicate to do so. Oof. Oh, I love this stuff. It's starting to settle in. There's a certain kind of comfort that that the tea gives me. This one is usually higher in caffeine because the leaves are so young and so fresh that they're still they still produce caffeine as an insecticide. It's a natural deterrent for the predator bugs that are trying to eat it. So when they're plucked, the bush itself sends out an emergency shot of caffeine, basically. And so, hey Rachel, how's it going? And you love the tea that I'm featuring this evening? Thanks. Yeah, it's a gorgeous blend. I've always loved white teas, and the thing about white tea is that they go well with flavors. You can put practically anything in there, and it gives way to whatever you're putting in. So, say if you're gonna put in a fruit blend like strawberry, blueberry, a little bit of lemon or something like that, it promotes the flavor that you're putting in while still maintaining the white tea flavor. So that's something that I love doing with white teas. Hey Pops, welcome. I love blending them because they are really super easy to flavor. And as well, they take to scents very easily. So you get something like a jasmine silver needle, which is a very popular blend. I always call it blend by habit, but it's not technically a blend. It's just a scented tea. Well, technically it's also a blend of leaves, but it's more of a grouping. It's all in the semantics. I don't want to get into that tonight. But they are very susceptible to scents, and they're very susceptible to the environment around it. So if you want to infuse it with jasmine or lavender or rose, you'll get a lot of the flavor from the additions without worrying about the tea overpowering it. So that's a very, very good thing to do when you're into blending. Oh, this is delicious. I love this stuff. I forgot to smell it. So in this particular blend, it's slightly perfumey, which is something that I thoroughly enjoy. When you drink a tea and you get a nice whiff of it going in, you get this kind of like a sense of what you're going to drink as it enters your palate. And I love this is very, very slight, very, very slight, soft mouthfeel on the palate. It's kind of watery, but it's there. Like it's kind of hard to describe because it's very slight. But what I love about this particular blend is that it's a slow burn, so it sits on your palate for quite some time, and as I talk, like it's emanating throughout the roof of my mouth, and it's hitting, like I can taste it in the back of my throat. That's a very pleasant experience, at least in my opinion, because you get this kind of full flavor that's still kind of delicate. Is it almost like chrysanthemum tea? Kind of, sort of, because I mean, like chrysanthemum is a very floral kind of tea, but it gets to be more on the fragrant side. This one has a very low fragrance. It's subtle. I would say chrysanthemum tea is more overtly perfumey, but in this one it's more like the scent is really subtle, but the flavor is stronger than the scent, if that makes any sense. And I love the way that it just sits there, because like I haven't had chrysanthemum tea in quite some time, but this is the kind of blend that you can add chrysanthemum to, and it would promote the flavor rather than compete with it. In this case, I'm really enjoying how subtle it is. On its own, this is a pretty strong white tea for a white tea, if that makes any sense. Generally, white teas can be a little bit underwhelming, but this one has a nice flavor to it. So you might try that before bedtime tea. You're in a rose mood lately. Oh yeah, and rose is really good for right before bed because it's nice and fragrant, and it tends to calm. It has a calming effect, but on top of that, there's no caffeine in it, so you're able to drink all you want. And you're not going to get the jitters, you're not going to be awake, you're not going to be affected whatsoever. When you drink the rose tea, it's an overall pleasant experience generally, if you like rose tea. Oh, I forgot, gotta do the Thomas taste. All right, here we go. Oh, that is delicious. I love the way it just kind of settles in the back of my throat. There's very little taste up front because generally up front you'll get more of a bitter flavor. There's really none of that. Everything is kind of savory, slightly salty, coppery, like a bronze kind of flavor. And it just sits there and it coats your tongue pretty evenly. But also, I tend to taste it from the back of my throat. And that's probably because I'm talking and it's bringing up all the flavor back from the back of my throat forward. So I'm getting a sensation of it covering and coming forth. It's really interesting. I do sense that on some teas, but I don't really vocalize it all that often because I don't really. For me, it's natural. And when I do these tastings and it's live and I'm thinking on the fly, sometimes these things just come forth. It's it's very interesting because I don't think I've ever vocalized it in that way before. And there's a sort of vegetal undertone that kind of reminds me of the way that when you mow a wet lawn and you have that kind of scent in the air of a vegetal grassiness, and it has that slight dewy like a saltiness to it in the air. I'm getting that in my mouth, and it's very, very delightful. I thoroughly enjoy this. This is. I mean, I love white tea, and I tend to drink it mostly during the afternoon because it's good for a pick me up without being too strong. When you don't have to wake up in the morning, hopefully, you don't need a kick in the pants. This basically helps you continue the energy level that you're already producing. So if you need a bit of a boost or something like that, I would always recommend a white tea or a green tea. White has a more subtle flavor, so it's all about what you're in the mood for. And this tends to be more of an afternoon tea to me. Okay, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, now's the time. I'm going to answer the Teresa question, what would I pair this with? And this one is kind of a deceptively difficult question to answer because the flavor is so subtle. Whatever I pair it with, it'll the tea might get lost, if that makes any sense. So as I was saying before, you can blend it with anything fruity. You can do a fruit salad or a strawberry shortcake, something to that effect. If I were to do it with an entree, I would probably do it with something light as well, maybe a salad. Of course, you don't want to have a dressing that's too strong because that can overpower the white tea quite easily. So I probably wouldn't use anything like a ranch Anything creamy really might overpower the taste. But if I were to do something with, like, say, just oil and a little bit of vinegar, you'll get a good you'll get a good blend out of it. Just as long as the vinegar isn't too overpowering. The oil might be just perfect. What else? What else can I pair this with that wouldn't be uh, too strong? Maybe a sushi. I think a good sushi will go with it. Nothing fried. Like a shrimp tempura might be too strong. But you get like a nice spicy tuna. That's my go-to. I always judge a new sushi place by the spicy tuna. If they can't nail the spicy tuna, I don't have hopes for the rest of the restaurant. Um, but a good spicy tuna that's not too spicy. Um, the rice with it would probably be just perfect. White rice with a white tea would be awesome. And I love the way this kind of like, when I held it in my mouth for just a couple seconds, the warmth had a bit of a flavor of its own. By now this tea is moving more towards room temperature. Um, but in this case, as it sat there, it kind of enhanced the flavor a little bit. Um, because normally, I've mentioned this before, whenever a tea tends to cool down, the sweetness of it gets promoted while the savoriness dies down. In this case, it's maintaining it because you already have a slightly savory, but it's mostly smooth, uh, and kind of a velvety overall mouthfeel. But because it's not an overtly strong flavor, the temperature of the water tends to play around a little bit. So you're not going to get like 212 degrees tea, because this is a white tea. You're going to want to go to 180 max. But because I started at 180 and it's been cooling off pretty fast, it's approaching room temperature. It's not quite there yet, but it's maintaining that same level of flavor. And I'm getting kind of a little bit more of the vegetal side rather than the coppery salty side. Mm. And there's a certain something in that white tea that I'm struggling to find. I mean, it's there. It's there. I just don't know how to describe it. There's kind of like I don't know if this is, it's probably a thing somewhere, but you know how people sometimes put grass in their smoothies? This is more like a grass juice, kind of an overall flavor. And I'm really enjoying it. This is a nice, subtle blend, pretty smooth, pretty silky. Thoroughly enjoying it. Hey, Juliet, welcome. We're doing your white peony today. Oh, that's upside down. White peony, and it's incredible. Like, I love white peony in general, but in this case, like, because of the pluck, you can tell the difference. This is like a nice, strong blend for a white tea. Because you know what I'm talking about. Like white tea can be pretty subtle, but because this is the light pluck. Oh yeah, it's super smooth. I have to say, like, sometimes you get like a little bit of a bitter white tea, and that can be disappointing, because tea in its purest form is not going to be, it's not going to be bitter. It's once you put it through the process and you like heat it up and oxidize it and you make a stronger blend, that's where the bitterness comes from. But in this case, because it's such a is it bud only or is it bud and one leaf? It's actually bud and two leaves. At least in the ones that I pulled out. But yeah, this one, like, I do have some that are bud only and some that are bud and one leaf. The one that I had pulled out before had two leaves and the bud was kind of broken. So I'm assuming it's just the more traditional one. But it might just be the one that I picked out of the group, because it doesn't taste like it's all there, like I was able to find just buds, which is a good thing, because that contributes to its simple, the simplicity of the taste itself. I'm starting to get a little bit of a caffeine high, but in this case, I absolutely love it. See, here's another one that looks like, if I could see, the problem is like the stem is curly, so I can't really like show it off the way I would like. But yeah, this one is probably just a bud and one leaf, because it's too big to be just the bud, So I'm thinking that they got this this batch pretty early on in the season. It's not like Silver Needle season, but it's quite close to it. So they probably got it by the end of, I want to say, not even the end of March. I'm probably going to guess like, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the season. Because depending on where it grows, sometimes they start in February, sometimes they start in March. Generally, Bai Mudan is done within like the second week or third week of March. Again, depending on how the season went previously, what happened during the winter. And that's something that I find fascinating about tea development and the way it grows and the way it's reflected in the season. It's just a beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing. I don't know enough to say what would influence this kind of a tea from beforehand, like how much snow they got, how much winter rains, how the cold affected it. Like, I don't know that much. All I know is that it does have an effect, and usually depending on the weather, you get a good blend for the following season. So this was definitely, they had a good winter. That's all I'm able to say. Okay, so announcements. I do have an announcement coming up on the 4th. May 4th, we're going to do the Mother's Day tea for Gilda's Club. It's looking like I'm going to be hosting this live. So if you haven't already signed up, I highly encourage you. We're doing a tea and chocolate tasting. And it's going to be a lot of fun for you guys. A lot of fun for all you wonderful mothers out there who do so much during the rest of the year. This Mother's Day, treat yourself. This is the kind of thing that it's really fun. And like Gilda's Club is an amazing organization. I've said it 1,000 times and I'll say it 1,000 more. They are just absolutely wonderful people. I will post the link once again on the description. So if you haven't signed up already, go ahead and do it. I highly recommend it. You'll have a really good time. Yeah, I think that is the only announcement I have. Mainly because I was planning on doing a tea party this weekend and I completely forgot to set it up. Oops. My bad. So I'll probably set one up for next week. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Once again, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. It has been an incredible experience. Excuse me. I will post the link to the white peony, the Baimudan on Tealula, and I highly recommend it, you guys. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, have a wonderful night, a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.